There are certain texts in human history that do not merely record events, but actively forge them, shaping the contours of collective consciousness in ways profoundly destructive. Among these, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion stands as a chilling testament to the power of a fabricated narrative. It is not a document born of discovery or genuine revelation, but a malicious forgery, a meticulously crafted piece of anti-Semitic propaganda originating in late 19th or early 20th century Imperial Russia. Its core conceit, presented as the secret minutes of Jewish leaders plotting global domination through manipulation of finance, media, and political systems, taps into ancient fears and prejudices, giving them a pseudo-intellectual veneer. The philosophical questions it provokes are unsettling. What is the nature of truth when such an audacious lie can take root and propagate across continents and generations? It speaks to a deep human vulnerability to narrative, particularly narratives that simplify complex realities into easily digestible conspiratorial frameworks. The protocols offered a convenient scapegoat for societal ills, a ready explanation for the anxieties of modernization, industrialization, and political upheaval. It provided a seemingly rational basis for irrational hatred, allowing fear to coalesce into focused animosity. Its enduring power lies not in its veracity, which has been repeatedly and definitively debunked, but in its psychological utility. For those seeking to justify prejudice, to deflect blame, or to rally support against a perceived enemy, the protocols offered a potent ideological weapon. It is a blueprint for dehumanization, transforming an entire people into a monolithic, malevolent force. The text reveals the dark alchemy of fear, projection, and the desire for control. By inventing an all-powerful, insidious other, it allows its adherents to feel both victimized and morally justified in their antagonism. The shadow it casts extends through the 20th century and into the present, a persistent and poisonous phantom in the global discourse, reminding us of the fragility of reason and the terrifying resilience of manufactured hate. In the nascent days of mass media, when the boundaries between earnest reportage and sensationalist spectacle were still being drawn, occurred an event that, though ultimately a deception, revealed much about the human appetite for wonder and the persuasive power of print. The Great Moon Hoax of 1835, published serially in the New York Sun, purported to describe groundbreaking astronomical discoveries by Sir John Herschel using a powerful new telescope at the Cape of Good Hope. These articles detailed a lunar landscape teeming with exotic flora, strange animal life, and, most famously, bipedal, winged humanoids, the Vespertilio Homo, or Batman. The allure of this narrative was profound. It tapped into a universal human curiosity about life beyond Earth, a desire to pierce the veil of the cosmos and find companionship in the vast emptiness. It promised not just scientific advancement, but a revelation that would fundamentally alter humanity's perception of its place in the universe. Philosophically, the hoax highlights the tension between empiricism and imagination. While science strives for verifiable truth through observation and experimentation, the human mind is equally drawn to the extraordinary, the romantic, the narrative that transcends mundane reality. The public, eager for marvels, was primed to believe. This episode serves as a fascinating study in credulity and skepticism. Why were so many convinced? Partly due to the respected names invoked, partly due to the scientific language employed, but perhaps most significantly because the story resonated with a deep-seated longing for the magnificent. It underscored the immense power of the press to shape public perception, to conjure realities from ink and paper, and to exploit the human inclination towards belief in the incredible. The hoax also, paradoxically, fueled scientific interest, demonstrating the public's hunger for astronomical news, even if it had to be fabricated. It was a grand performance, an elaborate fiction that, in its very deception, illuminated the profound human yearning for discovery, for meaning, and for the enchantment that lies just beyond the horizon of the known. The Earth, in its silent rotation, occasionally yields not truth, but reflection. Such was the case with the Cardiff Giant, a colossal figure unearthed in 1869, ostensibly a petrified man of an ancient epoch. Its very existence spoke to a human yearning for the monumental, the biblical, the confirmation of tales whispered through generations about giants walking the land. It tapped into a profound desire for a past more wondrous, more tangible than mere geological strata could offer. For a time, this gypsum behemoth, crafted with meticulous deceptive intent by George Hull, became an altar to human credulity. People flocked to witness it, to touch the rough, stony surface, to imbue it with authenticity. It was not just a curiosity. It was a phenomenon, a cultural touchstone that blurred the lines between science and faith, between fact and the fervent wish for a grander narrative. The giant's success lay in its perfect resonance with the prevailing intellectual currents of its time, a blend of burgeoning scientific inquiry and lingering religious literalism. Its very discovery was a performance, an elaborate stage production designed to manipulate perception. When the truth inevitably unraveled, revealing the giant as a skillfully carved deception, the revelation itself became as compelling as the initial hoax. It forced a collective introspection. Why do we want to believe so badly? What does this tell us about the human mind's susceptibility to illusion, especially when that illusion confirms a deeply held conviction or fulfills a craving for the extraordinary? The Cardiff Giant stands not as a testament to ancient beings, but as a stark, stony monument to the intricate dance between belief and skepticism, and the enduring human capacity to craft and embrace narratives that transcend the mundane. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound truths we discover are about ourselves, mirrored in the deceptions we so eagerly embrace. The delicate whisper of the wind through the trees, the fleeting dance of light on water. These elemental experiences often nudge the human heart towards enchantment, towards the possibility of worlds unseen. In the case of the Cottingley Fairies, this yearning for the ethereal materialized in a photographic proof offered by two young girls, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, during the tumultuous years of the Great War. Their seemingly innocent snapshots of diminutive, winged beings amidst the foliage became a beacon for those desperate for wonder, for a reprieve from the stark, mechanistic horrors of the industrial age and the profound grief of global conflict. It was a collective sigh of relief, of validation of the unseen, a tangible link to a world of magic that felt increasingly distant. The appeal transcended mere curiosity. It became a philosophical comfort, championed notably by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, steeped in spiritualism, saw in these images not just whimsical creatures, but evidence of a broader, benevolent spiritual realm. The true fascination lies not in the simple cardboard cutouts and hat pins that formed the basis of the hoax, but in the profound human desire that allowed such flimsy evidence to take root and flourish. It speaks to the power of suggestion, the malleability of perception, and the way in which pre-existing beliefs can shape the interpretation of facts. For decades, even after the girls, now elderly women, confessed the charming deception, a part of the collective psyche clung to the possibility, a testament to the enduring human need for magic in a world increasingly rationalized. The Cottingley Fairies are not merely a tale of childhood mischief, but a poignant reflection on the human spirit's unyielding quest for beauty, for mystery, for meaning beyond the tangible, and the subtle ways in which hope and imagination can construct a reality, however fleeting, that offers solace and wonder. The whisper of the Vinland Map, a cartographic enigma, emerged from the shadows of history to cast a profound question mark upon the established narratives of transatlantic discovery. Purportedly a 15th-century parchment, it tantalizingly depicted a landmass west of Greenland, bearing the inscription Vinland Insula, suggesting a pre-Columbian European encounter with North America. Its appearance in the mid-20th century ignited a fervent debate, challenging the very bedrock of the Columbian legacy and inviting a philosophical contemplation on the nature of historical truth, the human craving for precedence, and the seductive power of a rewritten past. For decades, scholars grappled with its authenticity. The map represented a profound disruption, offering the tantalizing possibility that Viking sagas were not mere legends, but historical documents awaiting cartographic corroboration. It spoke to a deep human desire to unravel secrets, to affirm ancient myths with tangible evidence. Yet, the philosophical weight of its potential truth was matched by the equally profound implications of its potential fabrication. The scientific tools of the modern age, radiocarbon dating of the parchment, microchemical analysis of the ink, were brought to bear, transforming the artifact from a historical document into a crucible for forensic examination. The discovery of anastase, a titanium dioxide pigment not commercially available until the 1920s, in the map's ink, delivered a seemingly definitive verdict: a masterful, yet ultimately flawed, forgery. The Vinland Map, then, becomes more than just a historical artifact. It transforms into a mirror reflecting our relationship with authenticity. What does it say about us that such a fabrication could capture the imagination for so long? Perhaps it speaks to a collective longing for alternative histories, for narratives that challenge the dominant paradigms. It underscores the enduring vulnerability of historical inquiry to both genuine error and deliberate deception. The map, even in its inauthenticity, remains a powerful testament to the human impulse to claim discovery, to rewrite the past in ways that serve contemporary desires, and to the relentless, often ambiguous, pursuit of certainty in the annals of time. Its legacy is not of a forgotten discovery, but of a remembered deception, a potent reminder of the subtle interplay between fact, desire, and the elusive nature of truth. The sensational unveiling of the Hitler Diaries in 1983 by the German magazine Stern was a spectacle of historical proportion, a moment when the world held its breath, poised on the precipice of a purported revelation. These 62 volumes, ostensibly penned by Adolf Hitler himself, promised an unprecedented glimpse into the mind of one of history's most monstrous figures, offering the seductive whisper of hidden truths and untold narratives. The initial frenzy, fueled by millions of dollars and a desperate global media, underscored a profound human craving, the desire to penetrate the impenetrable, to rationalize the irrational, and to find the banal or even the human within the utterly inhuman. It was a testament to the enduring power of historical figures, even those embodying ultimate evil, to captivate and compel. Yet, the philosophical weight of these purported revelations was quickly eclipsed by the swift, brutal hammer of forensic scrutiny. The diaries, initially authenticated by a handful of experts under immense pressure and without proper scientific rigor, rapidly unraveled under the gaze of true historical and scientific investigation. The glaring inconsistencies, the laughably anachronistic details, and crucially, the forensic analysis of the paper and ink which revealed materials not available during Hitler's lifetime exposed them as a crude, yet initially convincing, forgery. The diaries were not merely fabrications. They were caricatures, clumsy attempts to mimic a historical voice that ultimately betrayed their inauthenticity. The episode of the Hitler Diaries, then, transcends the mere narrative of a grand deception. It becomes a profound case study in the fragility of truth, the seductive power of sensationalism, and the ethics of historical gatekeeping. It lays bare the collective human vulnerability to confirmation bias and the intoxicating allure of forbidden knowledge. What does it reveal about our relationship with evil that we so eagerly sought a narrative, any narrative, to explain Hitler's psyche, even if it was a manufactured one? The diaries, in their exposed falsity, serve as a chilling reminder of the ease with which historical narratives can be manipulated, the dire consequences of intellectual laziness, and the enduring responsibility of scholarship to resist the siren call of the scandalous. They are a testament not to Hitler's hidden thoughts, but to the pervasive human desire for narrative closure and the unsettling echo of how easily that desire can be exploited. The Amityville horror claims, born from the alleged experiences of the Lutz family in a seemingly cursed house, stand as a profound testament to the fragile boundary between narrative and reality and the deep human propensity for belief. It is not merely a tale of a haunting, but a complex tapestry woven from trauma, media sensationalism, and the collective psyche's hunger for the extraordinary. Philosophically, it invites contemplation on the very nature of truth itself. Can a widely disseminated story, regardless of its factual basis, acquire a form of existential weight, becoming real in its cultural impact? The claims probe the psychological dimensions of fear, how the foreknowledge of a heinous crime within a space can imbue it with an almost tangible malevolence, a projection of our own anxieties onto the physical environment. The house, in this sense, becomes a vessel, not just for spirits, but for human dread and imagination. It speaks to our deep-seated need to rationalize the inexplicable, to attribute an external, supernatural cause to internal unease or the banality of evil. The Amityville narrative, amplified by books and films, transformed a personal ordeal into a public spectacle, blurring the lines between victim and performer, between genuine distress and calculated fabrication. It reveals how readily a compelling story, tapping into archetypal fears of demonic possession and cursed places, can take root in the collective unconscious, enduring far beyond any debunking. This phenomenon underscores our inherent vulnerability to suggestion, our willingness to suspend disbelief in the face of the uncanny, and the potent, often terrifying, alchemy that occurs when history, horror, and human credulity converge. It is a modern Gothic, where the spectral is less about disembodied entities and more about the haunting echoes of human violence and the insidious power of a well-told lie. The phenomenon of the Fox sisters, Kate and Margaret, and their purported communication with the dead through mysterious raps, offers a poignant and illustrative case study in human credulity, the profound yearning for connection beyond the veil, and the birth of a widespread belief system from deliberate artifice. At its core, this episode is a philosophical inquiry into the nature of belief itself. How can simple parlor tricks, born of childish mischief, blossom into a global movement, spiritualism, offering solace to millions grieving the pervasive losses of the 19th century? The sisters' initial deception tapped into a primal human need, the desire to transcend the finality of death, to believe that love and consciousness persist. Their spirit raps provided tangible, albeit manufactured, proof, offering comfort in an era marked by high mortality rates and the omnipresent shadow of loss. This reveals the psychological vulnerability of grief, how deeply held emotional needs can override critical faculties, making individuals susceptible to comforting illusions. The Fox sisters' story serves as a powerful testament to the power of collective suggestion and the human capacity for self-deception when faced with the inexplicable or the profoundly painful. Even after their eventual confessions, the spiritualist movement continued, demonstrating the remarkable resilience of belief systems once established, irrespective of their empirical foundation. It forces contemplation on the ethics of spiritual leadership, the responsibility of those who claim access to the divine or the departed, and the often fraught relationship between sincere faith and opportunistic charlatanism. Ultimately, the Fox sisters' hoax illuminates the enduring human quest for meaning and connection in the face of existential uncertainty, and the complex interplay between hope, vulnerability, and the seductive allure of the unseen. The night of October 30th, 1938, a seemingly innocuous Halloween Eve, witnessed a peculiar fracture in the collective consciousness of America. Orson Welles' Mercury Theater on the Air, presenting a dramatization of H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds, inadvertently unmasked a profound vulnerability within the human psyche, exposing the fragile membrane between perceived reality and fictional narrative. It was not merely a case of mistaken identity, but a chilling testament to the power of suggestion and the inherent human susceptibility to panic, especially when information is filtered through the intimate, authoritative conduit of radio. The broadcast, though punctuated by disclaimers, leveraged the medium's immediacy, mimicking news bulletins with such verisimilitude that listeners, tuning in late or distracted, bypassed the fictional framing and plunged directly into a terrifying, unfolding reality. This event illuminated several philosophical dimensions. It underscored the precariousness of our shared reality, revealing how easily a consensus can crumble under the weight of fear and misinformation, particularly in an era already rife with global anxieties and the specter of impending war. The human mind, seeking coherence, often fills informational gaps with the most readily available, even if terrifying, narrative. The panic was less about alien invasion and more about the innate human fear of the unknown, the sudden disruption of order, and the fragility of societal structures. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's primal response to existential threat, amplified by the illusion of direct, unmediated witness. The episode stands as a cautionary tale on the immense power of media to shape perception, not just by what it explicitly states, but by the very manner of its presentation, capable of turning an evening's entertainment into a widespread psychological phenomenon, a collective delusion born from the blurring of art and life. It was a visceral demonstration of how quickly the rational mind can yield to the urgent whisper of perceived catastrophe. The Curious Case of the Turk, an 18th-century chess-playing automaton, offers a profound meditation on the human desire for the miraculous, the nature of intelligence, and the enduring power of illusion. Presented as a mechanical marvel capable of outmaneuvering human opponents, this intricate contraption, adorned with pseudo-Oriental regalia, captivated European and American audiences for decades. Yet, beneath its gears, levers, and seemingly autonomous movements, lay not a triumph of early artificial intelligence, but a brilliantly executed human deception. A skilled chess master was meticulously concealed within its cabinet, manipulating the machine's movements with an ingenious system of levers and wires. The Turk was more than a mere parlor trick. It was a philosophical provocation. It tapped into a deep-seated human yearning for transcending limits, for imbuing the inanimate with life, and for witnessing the impossible. The widespread belief in its mechanical sentience speaks volumes about our projection of human qualities onto technology, our fascination with the ghost in the machine. It forced observers to confront the very definition of intelligence. Could a machine truly think? Or was thinking inextricably linked to consciousness, to the human spirit? The Turk, in its audacious fraudulence, inadvertently posed these questions long before the advent of modern computing. It highlighted the inherent human tendency to fill explanatory gaps with the most extraordinary narrative, especially when presented with compelling evidence, however fabricated. The deception also underscored the limits of perception and the ease with which our senses can be fooled when our desire to believe outweighs our critical faculties. In essence, the Turk was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, not just of its opponents on the chessboard, but of an entire society, offering a fascinating glimpse into the human mind's susceptibility to wonder and the enduring allure of the artificial. It was a mirror reflecting our own intellectual aspirations and our susceptibility to the grand illusion. The glimmers of Glozel, discovered in the French countryside in the 1920s, presented a profoundly unsettling tableau for the nascent discipline of archaeology and, indeed, for the very human understanding of historical truth. It began with a farmer, Emil Freyden, unearthing what appeared to be ancient artifacts, tablets inscribed with an unknown script, curious idols, tools, and ceramics. The initial excitement was palpable, promising to rewrite the prehistory of Europe, perhaps even revealing a lost civilization or a link to Atlantis. But soon, a creeping shadow of doubt began to lengthen across the sun-drenched fields. The objects were too numerous, too varied, too perfectly preserved in some instances, and a script too eerily similar to various known alphabets, yet entirely unique. This was not merely a debate about dating or interpretation. It was a visceral confrontation with the possibility of deliberate deception. Scholars divided, some fiercely defending the authenticity of Glozel, seeing in it a revolutionary breakthrough, while others, equally vehement, denounced it as an elaborate, cunning hoax. The ensuing scandal was a microcosm of intellectual conflict, exposing the fragility of expert consensus and the insidious power of confirmation bias. Did some believe because they wanted to believe in the extraordinary? Did others disbelieve because the implications were too disruptive to established paradigms? The psychological dimensions were as intricate as the archaeological ones. The farmer and his family, caught between accusations of fraud and claims of genuine discovery, becoming symbols of either innocent victims or master manipulators. The very earth, usually a silent, impartial witness to history, seemed to have been enlisted in a grand deception. Glozel remains, even today, a contested site, a spectral reminder that the past is not always what it seems, and that the human quest for knowledge is perpetually vulnerable to the seductive lure of the spectacular, the fraudulent whisper that masquerades as profound truth, leaving behind only the lingering, philosophical question of authenticity itself. The curious case of Johann Beringer and his infamous lying stones serves as a poignant, almost tragic, parable of intellectual hubris, the perilous nature of academic rivalry, and the profound vulnerability of even the most learned minds to the currents of ego and deception. In the early 18th century, Beringer, a respected professor of natural history at the University of Würzburg, was an eager, perhaps overly zealous, collector of fossils, a nascent field then rife with speculation and wonder. His colleagues, seemingly motivated by a potent cocktail of jealousy and a desire to expose his perceived arrogance, orchestrated an elaborate hoax. They commissioned local craftsmen to carve intricate images, birds, insects, frogs, even celestial bodies and Hebrew letters, on a limestone, then buried these fossils for Beringer to discover. Blinded by an insatiable hunger for groundbreaking discovery and perhaps a pre-existing belief in the capricious artistry of nature, Beringer interpreted these crude carvings as genuine, miraculous manifestations of divine creation, or, more scientifically, as hitherto unknown natural phenomena. His intellect, ordinarily sharp, became a tool for self-deception, weaving elaborate theories to explain the impossibly perfect forms. He even wrote and published a magnificent, richly illustrated volume, Lithographiae Würzburgensis, proudly presenting his monumental findings to the world. The moment of his devastating realization, when he allegedly discovered his own name carved into one of the stones, must have been an earth-shattering psychological collapse. The very act of publishing, meant to immortalize his name, instead cemented his public humiliation. Beringer's legacy became not one of scientific triumph, but a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that the pursuit of knowledge, if untempered by rigorous skepticism and an awareness of one's own biases, can lead to profound intellectual folly, transforming the very stones beneath our feet into silent, mocking witnesses of human credulity. A shadow fell across the sunlit fields of paleontological discovery, not from an ancient cloud, but from a carefully constructed deception. It began with the breathtaking promise of a missing link, a fossil unearthed in China that seemed to fuse the reptilian tail of a dinosaur with the avian body of a bird, a tangible bridge across evolutionary chasms. The allure was undeniable, the narrative compelling, evidence, at last, of the precise transition from ground dweller to sky soarer. The prestigious pages of National Geographic heralded its arrival, fanning the flames of public imagination and scientific excitement. Yet, beneath the veneer of groundbreaking revelation lay a patchwork of disparate truths, a composite creature fashioned not by nature's slow hand, but by human artifice. The Archaeoraptor, christened with such hopeful grandeur, was ultimately revealed as a chimera. The tail belonged to a dromaeosaur, perhaps a microraptor, while the body and head were those of a primitive bird, likely Eunornis. The very fragments that promised unification were, in reality, distinct narratives violently conjoined. This unraveling was not instantaneous. It was a testament to the self-correcting, albeit sometimes painfully slow, machinery of science. Skepticism, the critical acid in the alchemist's flask, began to corrode the initial certainty. Meticulous examination, independent verification, and eventually X-ray analyses exposed the seams where the disparate pieces had been glued together. The hoax laid bare the delicate balance between the passionate pursuit of knowledge and the ethical imperatives of its dissemination. It illuminated the human propensity for wishful thinking, the eager embrace of a narrative that perfectly fits a pre-existing hypothesis. It underscored the immense pressure for significant discovery, a pressure that can, in moments of ambition or haste, compromise the rigorous protocols of scientific inquiry. The Archaeoraptor affair was more than a mere footnote of fraud. It was a cautionary fable, reminding us that truth, in its most profound sense, demands not just revelation, but relentless verification, and that the integrity of knowledge rests not on the singularity of a find, but on the collective, skeptical vigilance of those who seek to understand the world. It was a moment where the very desire for truth momentarily obscured its true form, only to be reclaimed through the quiet, persistent work of those who refuse to be satisfied by anything less than authenticity. In the mid-20th century, as modernism sought to dismantle traditional forms and perceptions, two Australian poets, James Macaulay and Harold Stewart, conceived a deliberate act of literary sabotage. Their target was Angry Penguins, a magazine championing the very avant-garde expressions they found hollow and pretentious. From this intellectual disdain, Ern Malley was born, a fictional poet complete with a tragic bohemian biography and a posthumous collection of verse, The Darkening Ecliptic. The poems themselves were not crafted with care or inspiration, but assembled through a process of calculated absurdity, random dictionary entries, lines from disparate texts, nonsensical cliches, all stitched together with a deliberate lack of coherence and meaning. The intent was clear: to expose, through its very publication, the supposed gullibility and intellectual vacuity of modern literary criticism. Yet, the ensuing reception of Owen Malley's work unfolded with an ironic complexity that transcended the perpetrator's initial intent. Max Harris, the editor of Angry Penguins, embraced The Darkening Ecliptic with genuine enthusiasm, hailing it as a work of profound poetic genius, a testament to a new voice. This moment of sincere misapprehension, born from a desire to find meaning and value in what was designed to be meaningless, became the true heart of the hoax's philosophical resonance. It raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of art itself. If a work, born of deliberate emptiness, could evoke genuine aesthetic appreciation and critical analysis, what then constituted authentic creation? Was meaning inherent in the text, or was it a construct imposed by the reader, shaped by context, expectation, and the prevailing intellectual climate? The swift revelation of the hoax, followed by a sensational court case, did not merely expose a fraud. It ignited a profound debate about the very foundations of literary judgment, the susceptibility of critics to narrative and persona, and the elusive line between genuine innovation and outright charlatanry. Ern Malley, the manufactured poet, paradoxically became more significant in his non-existence than many legitimate voices. His fabricated lines, intended as a critique of modernism's perceived excesses, became, in a strange twist of fate, a potent commentary on the human compulsion to find order in chaos, beauty in randomness, and meaning even in the most meticulously crafted void. The hoax transcended its initial purpose, becoming a lasting monument to the intricate, often fraught, relationship between artistic intent, critical reception, and the enduring human quest for understanding in a world perpetually on the edge of the absurd. The emergence of J.T. Leroy from the literary shadows was, in retrospect, a profound meditation on the very nature of authenticity, authorship, and the ravenous appetite of culture. It was not merely a deception. It was a performance art piece of monumental scale, an unintentional philosophical inquiry into what we truly seek when we consume a narrative. The persona, a young, queer, HIV-positive, drug-addicted survivor of abuse, spoke with a raw, visceral voice that resonated deeply with a public yearning for marginalized truth, for the unvarnished pain of the outsider. But this voice, this life, was a construct largely crafted by Laura Albert. One might ask, what does it mean for a voice to be authentic if it is fabricated? Does the truth of a story lie solely in the biographical veracity of its author? Or can a manufactured persona, through its very artifice, speak to deeper, universal truths about suffering, survival, and the human condition? The Leroy hoax exposed our collective desire to romanticize trauma, to elevate the damaged, artists projecting onto them our own anxieties and hopes for redemption. It laid bare the cultural machinery that commodifies pain, creating a feedback loop with a more abject the suffering, the more compelling the narrative. Further, it challenged the very notion of authorship. Is an author a singular, fixed identity, or can authorship be a fluid, collaborative, even conceptual construct? In a world increasingly comfortable with avatars and digital personas, J.T. Leroy presaged a blurring of lines between the corporeal self and the presented identity. The deception, when revealed, forced a reckoning. If the stories moved us, if they evoked empathy, if they reflected societal ills, did their manufactured origin diminish their power? Or did the very act of fabrication, the audacious lie, become an integral part of its profound message, a meta-narrative about the fictions we construct, both for ourselves and for the world, to navigate existence? It remains a haunting reflection on our need for stories and our often unexamined willingness to believe. The legend of Howard Hughes, that reclusive titan of industry and eccentric billionaire, had long woven itself into the fabric of American myth. His self-imposed isolation created a vacuum, a tantalizing space ripe for speculation, and Clifford Irving, with audacious brilliance, sought to fill that void with a meticulously crafted lie, a secret autobiography, allegedly penned by Hughes himself. This was not merely a literary fraud. It was a profound exploration of our susceptibility to compelling narratives, our hunger for the hidden truth, and the inherent fragility of reality when confronted with a well-executed deception. Irving's audacity lay in his understanding of the human desire to penetrate the impenetrable, to unveil the secrets of the powerful and enigmatic. Hughes, unseen and unheard for years, was less a man and more a myth, an ideal canvas upon which to project a fabricated history. The hoax, therefore, was a commentary on the very nature of biography and history. Are they ever truly objective accounts, or are they always, to some extent, interpretations, constructions, shaped by the desires of the storyteller and the audience? Irving's autobiography pushed this to its extreme, demonstrating that a sufficiently plausible, intricately detailed fabrication could be embraced by the most reputable institutions, publishers, the press, the public, even in the absence of genuine verification. What does this reveal about truth itself? That it is not always immediately self-evident, but often contingent upon the authority of the narrator and the credibility of the presentation. The Irving hoax underscored the power of narrative to shape perception, to create a reality that, for a time, can eclipse the verifiable facts. It laid bare the institutional eagerness to believe in a story that promised unprecedented access and immense profit, highlighting how financial incentives and the lure of exclusivity can blind one to the glaring absence of genuine evidence. In the end, Hughes himself, emerging from his silence to debunk the tale, became the ultimate arbiter of truth, a living testament to the fact that while narrative can build worlds, reality, eventually, asserts its claim, often with a resounding public repudiation. The story of Han van Meegeren is not merely a chronicle of artistic deception. It is a profound philosophical meditation on the nature of authenticity, the malleability of perception, and the strange alchemy by which value is ascribed. Van Meegeren, a frustrated artist, masterfully exploited the art world's fervent desire for new Vermeer discoveries, crafting paintings so convincingly in the master style that they fooled the era's most eminent experts. His forgeries, once hailed as priceless treasures, were stripped of their esteem not by a sudden aesthetic revelation, but by the shattering truth of their origin. This raises a disquieting question. What was it precisely that changed? The pigment, the brushstrokes, the composition, these remained unaltered. Yet, the moment the hand of their true creator was revealed, their perceived worth plummeted from millions to mere curiosities. One might ponder the very essence of originality. Is it an inherent quality of the object itself, residing in the unique touch of a specific genius? Or is it a narrative construct, a collective agreement woven from provenance, historical context, and the shared belief in an artist's inimitable spirit? Van Meegeren's success suggests the latter, revealing how deeply our appreciation of art is entangled with its story, its myth, and the prestige of its purported creator. The Vermeer-ness of his fakes was not in their being by Vermeer, but in their appearing to be by Vermeer, fulfilling a pre-existing expectation and desire. The art world, in its yearning for a lost masterwork, was perhaps complicit in its own deception, projecting authenticity onto a canvas that merely reflected its own hopes. His eventual confession, born not of guilt but of a desperate need to avoid a charge of treason for selling a Vermeer to Nazi Germany, exposed not only his own brilliance as a forger, but also the fragile edifice upon which the market's valuation of art often rests. It was a testament to the power of a name, and the unsettling truth that sometimes the emperor's new clothes are painted with remarkable skill. The Ossian literary hoax, perpetrated by James Macpherson in the mid-18th century, offers a compelling lens through which to examine the human impulse to myth-make, the construction of national identity, and the fluid boundary between historical truth and cultural narrative. Macpherson presented his translations of ancient Gaelic poems by a mythical 3rd-century bard named Ossian, son of Finn Mac Cumhale, as authentic relics of a long-lost Celtic epic tradition. Europe, then steeped in romanticism and a yearning for primitive purity, embraced these melancholy, heroic verses with fervent enthusiasm. Goethe, Napoleon, and countless others found profound inspiration in Ossian's elegiac grandeur, believing they had stumbled upon a pre-Homeric European epic, a testament to a noble and ancient past. The subsequent revelation of their fabrication, though hotly debated for decades, underscored a deeper truth: the profound human desire for foundational myths, for a shared heritage that imbues a people with dignity and a sense of continuity. For Scotland, Ossian provided a heroic lineage, a counter-narrative to the dominant English cultural sphere. It was a literary act of self-creation, a projection of an imagined past onto the present, serving a crucial psychological and political function. The hoax challenged the very notion of literary authenticity. If a work, though forged, could inspire an entire generation, shape artistic movements, and deeply resonate with collective aspirations, was its truth then solely dependent on its historical veracity? Ossian, though a lie, became a truth in its impact, demonstrating how narratives, even invented ones, can become potent forces in shaping national consciousness and the broader cultural landscape. proving that sometimes the most influential stories are those we tell ourselves, regardless of their origin. The Zinoviev Letter, a spectral missive materializing from the shadows of British politics in 1924, stands as a haunting testament to the ephemeral nature of truth and the profound malleability of public perception. Ostensibly penned by Grigory Zinoviev, the head of the Comintern, and addressed to the British Communist Party, its contents were a clarion call for revolutionary fervor, an exhortation to intensify agitational work within the armed forces and other vital institutions. Its strategic unveiling, a mere 4 days before a general election, was no mere coincidence. It was a deliberate, surgical strike into the heart of an already tumultuous political landscape. The Labour government, then seeking re-election, found itself impaled upon the spike of this fabricated document. Its internationalist leanings and perceived softness on communism suddenly amplified into a terrifying specter of Soviet subversion. The philosophical echo of the Zinoviev Letter resonates deeply within the chambers of epistemology and political philosophy. It compels us to confront the unsettling reality that a carefully crafted fiction can, in moments of heightened anxiety and political vulnerability, exert a far greater influence on collective consciousness and electoral outcomes than any verifiable fact. It underscores the perilous fragility of democratic processes when exposed to the corrosive acid of disinformation. Was it a cynical act of a desperate political faction, a rogue intelligence operation, or a confluence of both? The exact provenance remains shrouded in the mists of historical conjecture, yet its impact was unequivocally real. It played upon latent fears, the deeply ingrained anxieties concerning social upheaval and foreign influence, thereby distorting the very fabric of national discourse. This episode serves as a chilling precursor to the contemporary landscape of manufactured outrage and weaponized narratives. It reveals how the unseen hand, whether of domestic opportunists or foreign adversaries, can subtly guide the currents of public opinion, turning the tide of an election with a whispered lie. The letter became less about its authenticity and more about its utility as a powerful symbol, a symbol of a perceived communist threat, of a government too lenient, of a nation teetering on the precipice of radical change. Its legacy is not merely a footnote in British political history, but a perennial warning that in the theater of power, the most potent weapon may often be a well-timed, strategically deployed untruth, capable of reconfiguring the very architecture of belief and, by extension, the trajectory of a nation. It invites a somber contemplation on the enduring susceptibility of the human mind to narratives that confirm pre-existing biases, even when those narratives are nothing more than cleverly constructed phantoms. The Reichstag Fire, a conflagration that engulfed the symbolic heart of German democracy on a chilling February night in 1933, stands as one of history's most potent and terrifying examples of a debated false flag operation. Occurring just days before a pivotal general election, the blaze was immediately attributed by the nascent Nazi regime to Marinus van der Lubbe, a Dutch communist, and by extension, to a vast communist conspiracy aimed at overthrowing the state. This narrative, promulgated with breathtaking speed and ferocity, served as the indispensable pretext for Adolf Hitler's immediate invocation of the Reichstag Fire decree, an emergency ordinance that effectively suspended civil liberties, abolished freedom of speech and assembly, and paved the way for the systematic persecution and imprisonment of political opponents, especially communists. The enduring philosophical gravity of the Reichstag Fire lies precisely in this profound suspicion that the Nazis themselves either instigated or deliberately allowed the inferno to rage, orchestrating a crisis to justify the very authoritarian measures they sought to implement. If true, it represents a chillingly cynical manipulation of national anxiety, a theatrical performance of threat designed to secure absolute power. It compels us to contemplate the insidious mechanisms by which nascent totalitarian regimes can fabricate, or at least strategically exploit, moments of crisis to dismantle democratic safeguards from within. The fire became not merely an event, but a catalyst, a potent symbol around which the Nazi Party could rally fear, demonize dissent, and consolidate its grip on every facet of German life, swiftly transforming a fragile republic into a monolithic dictatorship. This episode serves as a stark and timeless warning about the fragility of liberty in the face of manufactured panic. It illustrates how the state, when driven by an insatiable hunger for control, can weaponize fear itself, constructing elaborate narratives of internal enemies and existential threats to legitimize the suspension of fundamental rights. The very concept of a false flag operation, so vividly debated in the context of the Reichstag Fire, challenges the inherent trust citizens place in their governments, forcing a critical examination of official narratives, especially those that emerge during moments of national trauma. The unresolved question of who truly set the Reichstag ablaze continues to reverberate through history, not merely as a historical puzzle, but as a somber meditation on the ease with which truth can be suppressed, and the terrifying speed with which a nation can descend into tyranny when its populace is swayed by fear and its institutions fail to defend the precarious balance between security and freedom. It is a reminder that the most dangerous fires are often those ignited not by external enemies, but by forces within, seeking to burn away the very foundations of democratic governance. Operation Mincemeat, a peculiar ballet of bodies and fabrications, stands as a stark testament to the intricate artistry of deception. It was not merely a tactical maneuver, but a profound psychological experiment, a carefully orchestrated symphony of lies designed to reshape the very landscape of perceived truth during the maelstrom of World War II. The core of it, a lifeless body transformed into a courier of strategic falsehoods, forces us to confront the porous boundaries between reality and the meticulously constructed illusion. The genius lay not just in the planting of false documents, but in the crafting of Major William Martin, a phantom brought to life through the mundane detritus of a fictional existence. Love letters, theater stubs, a bank overdraft notice. This minutiae, the very texture of a human life, lent a chilling authenticity to the grand deception. It speaks volumes about the human psyche's inherent need for narrative coherence, for the comforting weight of detail before it accepts a new reality. One might ponder the philosophical implications. If a fully fleshed-out human story, however fabricated, can so profoundly alter the course of nations, what then of the truths we hold dear, often build upon far less rigorous scrutiny? It reveals this startling fragility of the edifice of perception, especially when confronted with a narrative designed to exploit inherent biases or desires. The Axis powers, eager for intelligence that confirmed their suspicions about Allied intentions, were, in a sense, primed for the lie. Mincemeat was not just about planting a seed of falsehood. It was about cultivating the fertile ground of expectation and confirmation bias within the enemy's mind. The operation became a macabre theater, with a dead man as its unwitting lead actor, performing a play whose audience was entire military high commands. The success of Mincemeat compels us to consider the ethics of such profound manipulation in times of existential conflict. Is the wholesale fabrication of reality, the deliberate obfuscation of truth, always justifiable when the stakes are so high? It forces a confrontation with the uncomfortable truth that war, stripped of its heroic veneer, is often a brutal game of psychological warfare, where the most potent weapons are not always steel and fire, but the insidious whispers of engineered doubt and the compelling allure of a perfectly crafted lie. The operation remains a chillingly elegant demonstration of how human vulnerability to narrative and the often unquestioned trust in evidence can be weaponized with devastating effect, turning the very fabric of belief into a strategic battleground. The Sokal Hoax, a peculiar intellectual insurgency perpetrated by physicist Alan Sokal, stands as a stark, if uncomfortable, mirror reflecting certain disquieting tendencies within the academic landscape. It was not merely a prank, but a deliberate, surgical strike against what Sokal perceived as intellectual sloppiness, an uncritical embrace of fashionable theoretical constructs, and a worrying disregard for empirical rigor within segments of the humanities and social sciences. By submitting an article deliberately crafted as a pastiche of postmodern jargon, utterly devoid of coherent meaning or logical argument, and witnessing its acceptance by a reputable journal, Sokal forced a confrontation with fundamental questions about truth, knowledge, and academic integrity. At its heart, the hoax was a direct challenge to extreme forms of epistemic relativism, the notion that all knowledge is merely a social construct, or that objective reality is forever beyond our grasp. Sokal, rooted in the empirical disciplines, was effectively asking, if truth is so fluid, so malleable, can anything truly be asserted? Can a physicist's understanding of gravity be dismissed as merely one narrative among many, as valid as a mystical incantation? The successful publication of his nonsensical piece suggested a troubling answer, that perhaps, in some quarters, the form of discourse, the appropriate jargon, the approved theoretical references, had eclipsed the substance of argument or the demand for empirical grounding. It cast a harsh light upon the efficacy of peer review and the intellectual standards of certain academic fields. How could an article so demonstrably lacking in content pass through the supposedly rigorous gates of scholarly scrutiny? This question compelled a wider introspection into the nature of academic discourse itself. Does complex language always signify profound thought, or can it, at times, serve as an elaborate camouflage for intellectual vacuity? The Sokal Hoax suggested the latter was a very real danger, creating an emperor's new clothes scenario where fear of appearing ignorant led to the uncritical acceptance of obscure, yet ultimately meaningless, prose. Ultimately, the Sokal Hoax serves as a perennial reminder of the vital importance of clarity, logical coherence, and empirical accountability in the pursuit of knowledge, irrespective of disciplinary boundaries. It underscores the perilous path taken when intellectual fashion supersedes intellectual rigor, and when the pursuit of an external, verifiable reality is abandoned in favor of an endless, self-referential game of linguistic constructs. It was, and remains, a stark call for intellectual humility and a relentless commitment to the arduous task of discerning truth from artifice. The shadow cast by Janet Cook's Jimmy's World remains a stark, haunting reminder of the precarious boundary between narrative and truth and the profound ethical chasm that can open within the very heart of journalism. It was not merely a lapse in judgment, but a deliberate fabrication, a meticulously crafted fiction presented as raw, unflinching reality, the plight of an 8-year-old heroin addict named Jimmy. This story, published in the Washington Post, resonated with a chilling authenticity that captivated, horrified, and ultimately deceived a nation, culminating in a Pulitzer Prize that was, in its very essence, a monument to a lie. The philosophical questions it provokes are myriad and disquieting. What is the allure of such a narrative? Was it the potent cocktail of innocence corrupted, the abject tragedy of a child lost to the streets, that made it so readily believed? Perhaps it spoke to a collective societal fear, a confirmation of unseen urban maladies, making the desire for its truth override the necessity of its verification. Cook, driven by ambition, perhaps by a distorted belief in the greater truth of a problem she wished to illuminate, constructed a phantom. Yet, in doing so, she betrayed the fundamental covenant of her profession, to report, not to invent. This incident unveiled the fragile trust upon which the edifice of journalism rests. When the purveyor of news becomes the weaver of tales, the very foundation of public discourse trembles. It forces us to confront the inherent human susceptibility to compelling stories, particularly those that stir deep emotional responses. The revocation of the Pulitzer, an unprecedented act, was a desperate attempt to reclaim a semblance of journalistic integrity, yet the scar remained. Jimmy's World, serves as a perpetual memento mori for the ethical journalist, a specter whispering of the perilous seduction of the imagined and the devastating consequences when it usurps the sacred mantle of the real. It asks us to perpetually question not just the story, but the storyteller and the complex interplay of ambition, empathy, and the elusive nature of truth itself. Stephen Glass's journalistic fabrications unfurled not as a singular, catastrophic error, but as a creeping, insidious contagion, a labyrinthine symphony of deceit that corroded the very core of trust within one of America's most respected political magazines, The New Republic. His was a masterclass in sustained, systemic deception, a carefully constructed alternate reality where sources were invented, quotes were conjured, and entire events were conjured from thin air, often buttressed by fake voicemails, fabricated letterheads, and even non-existent websites. It was an architecture of lies so intricate, so convincingly layered, that it managed to elude detection for years. The philosophical implications of Glass's charade delve deep into the psychology of fabrication and the vulnerability of institutions. What compels an individual to weave such an elaborate tapestry of falsehoods, not once, but dozens of times? Was it an insatiable hunger for professional validation, a desperate need for the spotlight, or a more profound disconnect from reality, where the imagined became more compelling than the mundane truth? Glass's stories were often quirky, sensational, or perfectly aligned with the magazine's progressive worldview, perhaps creating a collective blind spot among his editors who, eager for compelling narratives, allowed their belief to outweigh their scrutiny. This saga highlights the perilous ease with which a charismatic deceiver can exploit the trust inherent in collaborative work environments. It speaks to the illusion of authenticity in the digital age, where superficial proofs can be manufactured with chilling ease, challenging our very definition of verifiable reality. The betrayal extended beyond the readers. It was a profound violation of trust with his colleagues, mentors, and the institution itself, leaving a lasting scar on the credibility of a profession meant to champion truth. Glass's fall, precipitous and public, serves as a stark, enduring parable of the corrosive power of unchecked ambition, the seductive allure of the extraordinary over the factual, and the enduring fragility of truth in a world increasingly susceptible to its artful manipulation. It compels us to perpetually question, to dig deeper, and to remember that the most captivating stories are often the ones most worthy of suspicion. The Turin Shroud, a linen cloth bearing the faint, negative image of a crucified man, has long stood at the volatile intersection of faith, history, and scientific inquiry. For centuries, it has been venerated by many as the authentic burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth, a tangible relic offering an almost impossibly intimate connection to the divine. Yet, it is precisely its extraordinary nature that has fueled a profound and persistent debate, casting it, from many others, as one of history's most compelling and successful medieval forgeries. One might ponder the sheer audacity, or perhaps the profound piety, that would inspire such a creation. If a forgery, it is a masterpiece of deception, one that has captivated and convinced millions across centuries, hinting at an unknown artist of unparalleled skill and foresight. The scientific evidence, notably the carbon-14 dating tests conducted in 1988, which placed the cloth's origins squarely within the medieval period, between 1260 and 1390 AD, seems to offer a definitive pronouncement against its biblical authenticity. This finding, for the skeptical mind, transforms the shroud from a sacred artifact into a fascinating historical enigma, a product of human ingenuity rather than divine impression. Yet, the debate persists, fueled by anomalies, alternative theories, and perhaps, more profoundly, by the human heart's yearning for the miraculous. Does the designation of forgery diminish its power? For some, perhaps. For others, it merely shifts the nature of its wonder. It becomes a testament to human belief itself, to the enduring power of symbols, and to the profound human need to manifest the intangible divine into something seen, something touched. The shroud, whether relic or ruse, remains a powerful mirror, reflecting our desires for certainty, our capacity for faith, and our ceaseless fascination with the boundary between the earthly and the transcendent. It stands as a silent challenge, inviting us to contemplate not only its origins, but the very nature of truth and conviction in the face of the unknown. The Feejee Mermaid, a curious and unsettling artifact of 19th century showmanship, stands as a grotesque yet revealing testament to humanity's enduring fascination with the bizarre and its susceptibility to artful deception. This creature, purportedly a genuine biological marvel from distant Pacific waters, was in reality a carefully constructed fabrication. The head and torso of a juvenile monkey stitched with remarkable crudeness to the tail of a fish. Its very existence, and a widespread belief it initially commanded, speaks volumes about an era poised precariously between lingering superstition and the dawning age of scientific scrutiny. It arrived in America via the cunning entrepreneur P.T. Barnum, a master manipulator of public perception who understood implicitly the allure of the exotic and the power of a compelling narrative. Barnum did not merely display the mermaid. He orchestrated its unveiling with an elaborate marketing campaign, planting stories, using pseudonyms, and building an almost irresistible aura of mystery and debate around its authenticity. The public flocked to see it, drawn by the promise of the impossible made real, by the tantalizing glimpse of a world still brimming with unknown wonders. One might ponder what psychological hunger this crude composite satisfied. Was it a desire for magic in an increasingly rationalized world? A yearning for connection to ancient myths of sirens and sea folk? Or simply the thrill of being part of a grand spectacle? A collective suspension of disbelief? The Feejee Mermaid was never truly convincing to the discerning eye, yet its power lay not in its biological veracity, but in its dramatic presentation and the human willingness to be momentarily, delightfully fooled. It was a mirror reflecting our own credulity, our longing for the marvelous, and the curious way in which we often prioritize the captivating story over empirical truth. Ultimately, the Feejee Mermaid endures not as a zoological specimen, but as an iconic symbol of the art of the hoax, a whimsical yet profound reminder of the thin, permeable veil between reality and illusion, especially when profit and spectacle are involved. The American West, a landscape still largely untamed, was then a crucible of dreams and audacious schemes, a place where fortunes were seemingly conjured from thin air. It was into this fertile ground of ambition and avarice that Philip Arnold and John Slack, two cunning prospectors, sowed the seeds of what would become a magnificent deception. They presented to an eager world, and more specifically to a cadre of astoundingly wealthy and influential men. Figures like Charles Tiffany and Baron Rothschild, the tantalizing prospect of a vast, untouched diamond field, an unprecedented trove hidden within the remote wilderness. Their method was artful in its simplicity and profound in its psychological insight. They scattered real, albeit modest, quantities of rough diamonds and other precious stones across a carefully chosen, isolated plot of land, creating an illusion of natural abundance. What this hoax profoundly illuminated was the human predisposition for belief, particularly when belief aligns with fervent desire. The allure of unimaginable wealth dulled the sharp edges of skepticism, even among the most astute financiers of the era. The initial expert verification, however cursory, by a respected geologist, even if later revealed to be insufficient, served to legitimize the fantasy, transforming it from a mere tale into a perceived reality. Investors, blinded by the glitter of promised riches, suspended their critical faculties, investing millions in what they believed to be the greatest discovery of the age. The narrative of boundless opportunity in the West, already deeply ingrained in the American psyche, provided a perfect backdrop for such an extravagant claim. It spoke to a collective yearning for the miraculous, for a shortcut to opulence. The eventual unraveling of the deception by Clarence King, a meticulous geologist, was not just a financial correction, but a profound revelation of human folly and the fragility of constructed reality. King's scientific rigor cut through the carefully woven fabric of lies, exposing the scattered gems as a stage performance, not a natural occurrence. The hoax, in its wake, left not only financial ruin for its victims, but also a stinging sense of public humiliation, a stark reminder of how easily our deepest desires can be exploited and how readily we can surrender to the intoxicating promise of the extraordinary, even when the evidence is, upon closer inspection, merely a clever mimicry of nature's true abundance. It stands as a timeless parable of avarice, credulity, and the often deceptive gleam of fortune. In the quiet fields of the English countryside, and later across the globe, intricate geometric patterns began to appear, seemingly overnight, etched into the golden canvases of wheat, barley, and corn. These crop circles, with their astonishing precision and scale, quickly transcended simple curiosity to ignite a global fascination, touching upon humanity's ancient yearning for contact with the unknown. For many, they were undeniable evidence of extraterrestrial visitation, a cosmic language whispered from the stars, or perhaps the manifestation of esoteric Earth energies, a reawakening of ancient forces. The very impossibility of their creation by conventional means, or so it seemed, fueled a rich tapestry of theories, from the sublime to the utterly fantastical, speaking to a collective human desire for wonder and meaning beyond the mundane. What this phenomenon truly revealed, however, was less about alien intelligence and more about the intricate workings of the human mind, our capacity for both profound belief and ingenious deception. The patterns, initially simple circles, evolved into breathtakingly complex fractals and symbols, seemingly defying explanation. Yet, the eventual admission by Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, two ordinary men, that they had been creating these formations for years, employing nothing more than planks of wood, ropes, and a keen sense of geometry, shifted the entire narrative. Their demonstration, replicating the intricate designs with surprising speed and simplicity, laid bare the human authorship. What had been perceived as the inexplicable became, in an instant, a testament to human ingenuity, mischief, and a clever understanding of public credulity. The enduring fascination, even after the debunking, speaks volumes about our relationship with mystery. For some, the explanation was a disappointment, a stripping away of magic. For others, it became a new form of appreciation for the artistry of the hoaxers. The crop circles, in their human-made iteration, transformed from an enigma of the cosmos into a unique form of land art, a large-scale, ephemeral prank, or perhaps even a social experiment designed to gauge the limits of human belief. They became a mirror, reflecting our persistent need for extraordinary explanations, our susceptibility to compelling narratives, and the subtle dance between our desire for the miraculous and the often simpler, yet equally profound, realities crafted by human hands and minds. Even in their unmasking, these circles continue to whisper a truth about ourselves. Our boundless imagination, our capacity for both belief and artful deception, and our enduring search for meaning, whether it comes from the stars or from the fields beneath our feet. There is a peculiar allure to the surgeon's photograph, an image that for decades cast a long shadow of possibility over the dark waters of Loch Ness. Captured, so the story went, by Robert Kenneth Wilson, a London gynecologist at the dawn of a spring morning in 1934, it offered the world a fleeting, yet seemingly definitive, glimpse of the monster. A long, slender neck rising from the mist-shrouded surface, a small head at its apex. It was an almost impossibly elegant silhouette, perfectly conforming to the nascent myth. This single image, reproduced countless times, became the iconic representation of Nessie, embedding itself deeply within the collective unconscious. It wasn't just a photograph. It was an invitation to wonder, a validation of the unseen, a testament to the enduring human desire for the sublime, unknown lurking just beyond the veil of mundane reality. Yet, the philosophical weight of the image shifted dramatically with its eventual debunking. Revealed decades later as an elaborate hoax, a mere toy submarine affixed with a sculpted head, the photograph transformed from evidence into an object lesson in deception and credulity. The confession, whispered on a deathbed and later corroborated, pulled back the curtain on a familial prank, a stage moment of artifice designed to fool the Daily Mail. What does this revelation do to the myth? Does it diminish the wonder, or does it merely reframe it? The surgeon's photograph, even as a known fake, retains its power. It becomes a symbol not of a biological creature, but of the human capacity for belief, for narrative construction, for the perpetuation of a story that satisfies a deeper psychological need. It illustrates how deeply we crave mystery, how readily we embrace the extraordinary, and how an image, regardless of its empirical truth, can forge an enduring reality in the cultural imagination. The photograph, once a proof, now stands as a monument to illusion, a testament to the fragile boundary between what we see, what we wish to see, and what truly is. Its legacy is not in its depiction of a monster, but in its profound commentary on the human relationship with truth, myth, and the persistent allure of the unverified. The Voynich Manuscript, a medieval enigma bound in vellum, presents itself as a labyrinthine challenge to human comprehension. Its pages teem with an unknown script, flowing in an elegant, unbroken cascade, accompanied by peculiar illustrations of unidentifiable flora, celestial diagrams that defy known astronomy, and small, naked women bathing in verdant pools. For centuries, it has resisted all attempts at decipherment, confounding cryptographers, linguists, and historians alike. It is not merely unreadable. It is bafflingly consistent, adhering to internal linguistic rules, word lengths, and character frequencies that suggest a genuine language, yet yielding no discernible meaning. This profound resistance to interpretation is precisely where the hypothesis of an elaborate hoax gains its philosophical traction. Consider the audacious intellectual feat required to craft such a deception. To invent an entire visual and textual universe that perfectly mimics authenticity. A script that looks like writing, drawings that resemble scientific illustrations, a narrative flow that suggests coherence, yet conveys absolutely nothing. It is the ultimate conceptual art of meaninglessness, presented with such impeccable craft that its very lack of sense becomes its most profound mystery. If the Voynich Manuscript is indeed a hoax, it is not merely a simple forgery, but a masterpiece of sustained, multi-layered artifice. The creator, perhaps a brilliant, mischievous mind from the Renaissance, would have possessed an unparalleled understanding of linguistic structure and human psychology, knowing precisely how to create patterns that look meaningful without ever actually being so. The motive could have been anything from a grand intellectual prank, a demonstration of cryptographic mastery through its negation, or simply a sophisticated means to extract patronage from eager, credulous scholars. The very consistency of its unreadability, its refusal to break into sense despite every analytical tool thrown at it, could be the most damning evidence of its designed emptiness. The manuscript, then, is not a lost key to forgotten knowledge, but a mirror reflecting our own desperate human need to find order, pattern, and meaning, even in the face of a perfectly constructed void. It challenges our very definition of knowledge, asking whether an object that looks like truth but contains none is not, in its own way, a profound truth about human endeavor and the limits of understanding. The bordereau, a seemingly innocuous note listing military documents, was the initial spark of the Dreyfus affair, igniting a conflagration of injustice that consumed France for over a decade. It was not, in itself, a forged document when first discovered. Rather, it was a genuine memo, but its authorship was falsely attributed to Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish artillery officer, making him the convenient scapegoat for an act of treason committed by another. Yet, the affair's true descent into the abyss of deliberate deception came with the subsequent creation of a more egregious forgery, the Faux Henry. This document, concocted by Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Joseph Henry, was a desperate, malicious attempt to solidify the false accusations against Dreyfus and to quell the burgeoning doubts about his guilt. It was a fabrication born of institutional pride, anti-Semitic fervor, and a profound fear of admitting error. The Faux Henry represented more than just a piece of paper. It was a deliberate assault on truth, an official endorsement of lies designed to preserve the facade of state infallibility. It revealed the chilling capacity of power to manipulate reality, to weave a narrative of guilt around an innocent man, and to actively suppress any evidence that might unravel the meticulously constructed lie. The philosophical weight of this forgery is immense. It speaks to the fragility of justice in the face of prejudice, the corrupting influence of unchecked authority, and the tragic ease with which a society can be persuaded to accept a convenient falsehood over an inconvenient truth. It underscored the moral imperative to question official narratives, to seek out the concealed facts, and to stand against the tide of collective delusion. The bordereau became, through its misattribution and subsequent reinforcement by the Faux Henry, a stark emblem of how a nation's integrity can be corroded when its institutions prioritize self-preservation and prejudice over the fundamental principles of fairness and empirical truth. It remains a chilling testament to the dangers of a fabricated reality, wielded as a weapon against an individual and ultimately against the very soul of a republic. The saga of Joyce Haight, as presented by P.T. Barnum, stands as a foundational myth in the history of American showmanship, a stark illustration of the elastic boundary between truth and spectacle. Barnum, a master illusionist of public perception, introduced Haight to a curious 19th-century audience as the 161-year-old former nurse of George Washington, a fantastical claim designed to ignite the public's insatiable appetite for the marvelous and the bizarre. In an era less tethered to scientific rigor, the sheer improbability of her age only heightened the allure, transforming her into a living relic, a tangible link to the nation's foundational myth. This was not merely a tall tale. It was a carefully orchestrated narrative, a performance piece where the very identity of an individual was refashioned into an object of wonder and profit. The deception, at its core, probes the ethics of exploitation. Joyce Haight, an elderly African-American woman, was transformed into a commodity, her life narrative entirely subsumed by Barnum's entrepreneurial vision. One must ponder the extent of her agency, her understanding of the grand charade, and the inherent power imbalance that permitted such a wholesale fabrication of identity. Was she a knowing participant in her own commodification, or a vulnerable figure swept into Barnum's theatrical vortex? The question lingers on the moral implications of fabricating a human being's life story for financial gain, reducing an individual to a mere prop in a grand public illusion. The deception reached its macabre zenith after Haight's death, when Barnum, ever the showman, orchestrated a public autopsy. This final act, revealing her true age to be significantly younger, did not dismantle the spectacle, but rather cemented Barnum's reputation as a purveyor of delightful deceit. It demonstrated his profound understanding of human credulity and the strange joy people derive from being expertly fooled. The Joyce Haight deception, therefore, is not merely a historical footnote. It is a profound commentary on the human desire for wonder, the malleability of truth in the hands of a skilled storyteller, and the enduring ethical quandaries that arise when the pursuit of entertainment eclipses the fundamental dignity of the human subject. It speaks to the enduring power of narrative, however false, to shape public perception and to command belief. The illusion of the Tassidae tribe, unveiled in its stark deception, stands not merely as a historical footnote of anthropological fraud, but as a profound mirror reflecting humanity's intricate dance with myth, desire, and the construction of reality. It speaks to a deep, perhaps unconscious, yearning within the modern psyche for an unspoiled past, a noble savage untouched by the corrupting tendrils of civilization. In the mid-20th century, as the world grappled with its own accelerating complexities and disillusionments, the narrative of a lost Stone Age tribe, living in pristine harmony with nature within the Philippine rainforest, resonated with an almost spiritual longing. It offered a comforting antidote to progress, a dream of Edenic simplicity, that so many, from esteemed scientists to global media, were eager to embrace. This narrative, often uncritically, reveals a significant psychological vulnerability, the human propensity to believe what we wish to be true, especially when it aligns with our romanticized ideals or serves a particular agenda. The hoax illuminated the power dynamics inherent in the observation of the other, where indigenous peoples can be reduced to projections of external anxieties or desires, their authenticity often secondary to the narrative they are made to embody. The Tacidae became a canvas upon which modern society painted its fantasies of innocence, a pristine prelapsarian state. When the truth inevitably shattered this illusion, it left behind not just a sense of betrayal, but a deeper philosophical question about the very nature of authenticity, the ethics of representation, and how easily collective self-deception can masquerade as objective truth, particularly when fueled by a potent blend of scientific ambition, political opportunism, and a universal human hunger for wonder and purity in an increasingly disenchanted world. The Tacidae, in their fabricated existence, became a poignant testament to the persistent human need for narratives that transcend the mundane, even if those narratives are woven from the fabric of deceit. The Woo-suk stem cell fraud represents a searing indictment not only of individual hubris and scientific dishonesty, but also of the systemic pressures and psychological vulnerabilities inherent within the grand pursuit of knowledge. It was a deception born from the intense, almost intoxicating promise of a scientific breakthrough. The prospect of creating patient-specific embryonic stem cells, a medical miracle that offered hope to millions suffering from intractable diseases. This profound societal yearning for cures, for overcoming human frailty, created an environment ripe for illusion. Professor Huang, once hailed as a national hero in South Korea, became a symbol of how the immense pressure to achieve, to publish, and to secure funding can warp the very ethical foundations of scientific inquiry. The fraud exposed a collective psychological blind spot, where the sheer audacity of the claims, coupled with a nationalistic fervor and the immense hope invested in his work, overshadowed critical scrutiny. Peers, institutions, and even governments were seemingly complicit through their uncritical adulation, highlighting the human tendency to want to believe in the extraordinary, especially when it aligns with deeply held aspirations. It was a stark reminder that science, while aiming for objective truth, is ultimately a human endeavor, subject to the same frailties, ambitions, and moral compromises as any other human enterprise. The aftermath of the scandal was not just a loss of trust in one man, but a profound tremor through the very edifice of scientific credibility, forcing a deeper introspection into the peer review process, the ethical oversight of research, and the moral responsibilities that accompany the power to manipulate life at its most fundamental level. The Huang fraud serves as a cautionary tale, illuminating the treacherous terrain where aspiration collides with ambition, and where the human drive for progress can, if unchecked, descend into profound deception, leaving behind a trail of shattered hopes and a damaged faith in the very systems designed to uncover truth. A peculiar tapestry woven from digital threads and the raw fabric of human grief. This episode serves as a haunting contemplation on the nature of reality in an increasingly mediated world. At its core lay the phantom Lenny Kekua, a woman who never drew breath yet occupied a profoundly real space in the psyche of Manti Teo, a college football phenom. The unraveling of this elaborate deception, the revelation that the beloved, the mourned, the source of immense public sympathy was nothing more than a fabricated persona, forced a collective confrontation with the fragility of our perceived truths. What does it mean to love an illusion? What does it mean to mourn a non-existent being? The hoax transcended mere trickery. It became an ontological challenge. Teo, through no initial fault of his own, became a living testament to the mind's formidable capacity for belief, for constructing and inhabiting realities that are, in essence, pure projection. The public, too, became complicit, not in the deception itself, but in the eager consumption of a narrative that was emotionally resonant, tragically compelling. It laid bare the ease with which empathy can be manipulated, how readily we extend our hearts to stories, even those spun from ether. The architect of this deception, Ronaya Tuiasosopo, emerges as a figure of unsettling psychological depth, a modern-day trickster wielding the tools of the internet to conjure a world where love, loss, and identity could be conjured and dissolved at will. The Manti Teo hoax remains a poignant, unsettling parable of our digital age, a stark reminder that the boundaries between the tangible and the illusory are far more permeable than we often dare to acknowledge, and that even the most profound human connections can, disturbingly, be built upon foundations of pure, unadulterated fiction. It compels us to question the very verisimilitude of our experiences, both online and off. In October of 2009, a homemade, silver, saucer-shaped balloon, adrift against the vast Colorado sky, captured the breathless attention of a nation, embodying a collective gasp of horror and hope. Within its shimmering confines, it was believed, lay a small boy, Falcon Heen, a child inadvertently launched into the unknown. The immediate and widespread panic, fueled by incessant live news coverage, transformed a private family mishap into a public spectacle of shared anxiety. It was a moment when the fragility of life and the immense power of collective concern converged, demonstrating how swiftly a perceived crisis can galvanize societal empathy and mobilize vast resources. Yet, beneath the veneer of genuine alarm, a different narrative was quietly brewing, one born not of accident, but of audacious artifice. The revelation that Falcon had never been in the balloon, that the entire dramatic episode was a meticulously staged deception by his parents, Richard and Mayumi Heen, sent a ripple of profound betrayal through the public consciousness. This was not merely a prank. It was a calculated manipulation of the human capacity for compassion, a perverse quest for fleeting notoriety at the expense of authentic emotion and public trust. The Balloon Boy Hoax stands as a stark testament to the seductive allure of fame in a media-saturated world, illustrating the lengths to which individuals might go to transcend anonymity, even if it means fabricating a crisis that endangers their own child and exploits the goodwill of millions. It serves as a chilling reminder of the precarious balance between truth and performance in our hyper-connected society, and the profound disillusionment that follows when the collective heart, so readily offered, discovers it has been artfully and cruelly duped. The deflated balloon became a symbol, not of a lost child, but of a lost innocence in our perception of shared reality. The whisper began, a faint rustle in the countercultural winds of the late 1960s, suggesting that Paul McCartney, the beloved Beatle, had perished in a car crash in 1966 and was quietly replaced by a look-alike. This was not merely a rumor. It evolved into an elaborate, self-sustaining mythology, a testament to humanity's innate capacity for pattern recognition, even amidst chaos, and our deep-seated need for hidden meanings. Followers of the legend scoured album covers, from the bare feet on Abbey Road to the hand over Paul's head on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, interpreting every visual quirk as a veiled clue, a cryptic message from the bereaved surviving band members. Lyrical passages, especially when played backward, supposedly revealed confessions or funeral dirges. The very act of seeking these clues transformed mundane artistic choices into profound semiotic puzzles. This phenomenon speaks volumes about the nature of celebrity and the collective ownership projected onto icons. When a figure like Paul McCartney transcends mere human status to become a cultural archetype, their mortality becomes an almost unbearable proposition. The Paul is dead narrative, in a strange way, offered a peculiar form of immortality. If he died in his prime, then the image of the vibrant, youthful Beatle could be preserved untouched by the inevitable decay of time and the shifting sands of musical trends. It was a refusal to let go, a subconscious denial of impermanence. Furthermore, it tapped into a primal human desire for secret knowledge, for the privileged insight that lies beneath the surface of official narratives. In a world increasingly mediated and controlled, the idea of a grand, concealed truth, accessible only to the truly observant, offers a sense of agency and intellectual superiority. It was, perhaps, one of the earliest widespread examples of a pre-internet deep dive into a manufactured reality, a collective intellectual game that blurred the lines between fan devotion, paranoid ideation, and the sheer delight in crafting a compelling, albeit fictional, narrative. The legend endures, not as a factual claim, but as a fascinating artifact of collective psychological projection and the boundless interpretative power of the human mind. The allure of the memoir lies in its promise, an unvarnished window into another's soul, a testament to lived experience, often harrowing, always authentic. James Frey's A Million Little Pieces burst onto the literary scene with precisely this promise. A brutal, visceral account of addiction, recovery, and the arduous journey back from the precipice. It captivated readers and critics alike with its raw intensity, its unflinching gaze into the abyss of human suffering and the hard-won redemption. The narrative tapped into a profound societal hunger for stories of overcoming, for the heroic struggle against inner demons, offering a vicarious catharsis and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It felt true, it felt real, and for a time, that was enough. Then came the unraveling, the slow, agonizing revelation that significant portions of this deeply personal narrative were, in fact, fabrications. The truth was not merely embellished, but fundamentally altered, characters invented, events exaggerated or entirely manufactured. This exposure plunged the book and its author into a maelstrom of ethical debate, forcing a confrontation with the very nature of truth in storytelling. What, then, is the contract between author and reader in the realm of memoir? Is there a higher truth, an emotional authenticity that can justify factual inaccuracy? Frey's defense, at times, hinted at this, that the spirit of the story, its underlying message of struggle and redemption, remained true, even if the specific details were not. Yet, the philosophical dilemma persists. When a genre is predicated on the veracity of personal experience, does the deliberate act of invention not constitute a profound betrayal of trust? It forces us to ponder the very fallibility of memory, the human tendency to shape personal history into more coherent, dramatic narratives, but also the dangerous line where such shaping crosses into outright deception. The controversy surrounding A Million Little Pieces serves as a stark reminder of our deep-seated desire for genuine human connection through shared stories and the fragile ethical boundaries that underpin the literary landscape, particularly when autobiography attempts to speak to universal truths through individual experience. The tale of Mary Toft, the rabbit breeder of Godalming, unfurls not merely as a peculiar historical footnote, but as a profound meditation on the human psyche's peculiar susceptibility to the fantastical. It was the autumn of 1726, when this unassuming woman claimed to be birthing a succession of rabbit parts, paws, ears, fur, even a head, a grotesque menagerie emerging from her womb, defying all known physiological bounds. This audacious assertion, initially met with a mixture of horror and fascination, quickly captivated the public imagination and, more disturbingly, the minds of learned medical men. Dr. John Howard, a local surgeon, was among the first to witness these supposed deliveries, lending an air of legitimacy to the preposterous. Soon, Nathaniel St. Andre, surgeon to King George I, arrived, his presence elevating the hoax from local curiosity to national sensation. The very act of a royal physician lending his gravitas to such an impossibility speaks volumes about the era's intersection of nascent scientific method and lingering pre-Enlightenment credulity. What compels a society, even one on the cusp of scientific revolution, to embrace such an absurdity? Perhaps it is the inherent human longing for the miraculous, a yearning for evidence of life's boundless, inexplicable nature, even if that evidence is fabricated. Toff's narrative tapped into deep-seated beliefs about monstrous births and the mysterious workings of the female body, concepts still largely shrouded in ignorance and superstition. The initial failure of critical inquiry among the medical establishment, their eagerness to validate an extraordinary claim rather than rigorously debunk it, highlights the insidious power of confirmation bias and the allure of professional renown. They were not just observers. They were, in a sense, co-conspirators in the construction of a shared delusion, their reputations briefly tethered to the impossible. The eventual unraveling of the deception, primarily through the skepticism of Sarakas Ehlers and Toff's subsequent confession, was less a triumph of reason than a slow, painful awakening. It revealed the fragility of trust, the ease with which truth can be obscured by performance, and the collective will to believe. The hoax serves as a stark reminder that belief is not solely a product of evidence, but often a complex tapestry woven from hope, fear, ignorance, and the shared narratives we construct to make sense of a world that frequently defies easy comprehension. Mary Toff's rabbits, though never truly born, burrowed deep into the collective consciousness, a testament to the enduring power of a lie well told, and the profound, sometimes dangerous, human capacity for credulity. The specter of Spring-Heeled Jack, rather than a singular entity, materialized as a collective hallucination, a series of unsettling echoes across the English landscape from the late 1830s onwards. He was not born of flesh and blood, but from the fertile ground of urban anxiety, rumor, and the unsettling potential of an unknown individual to disrupt the quietude of Victorian nights. Described with consistent, terrifying details, glowing eyes, a devilish countenance, metallic claws, and an almost supernatural ability to bound over walls and rooftops, Jack preyed upon the collective imagination long before he touched any victim. His attacks, often targeting women, involved tearing clothes, scratching, or merely startling, suggesting a malicious prankster rather than a true assailant aiming for grievous harm. Yet, the consistency of the descriptions, passed from terrified victim to sensationalist newspaper, solidified his phantom form, imbuing him with a terrifying reality far beyond his physical presence. The endurance of the Spring-Heeled Jack phenomenon speaks volumes about the human propensity for myth-making in the face of the inexplicable. In an era grappling with rapid social change, industrialization, and the dislocating effects of urban sprawl, Jack became a personification of the unseen threats lurking in the shadows, a tangible form for intangible fears. He was the embodiment of the unknown intruder, the unpredictable element that defied the ordered march of progress. His elusiveness, the frustrating inability of authorities to apprehend him, only amplified his mythic stature, transforming him from a mere prankster into a folkloric demon. What drove the perpetrators, whether a single individual or a succession of imitators, to perpetuate such widespread terror? Perhaps it was a perverse thrill in manipulating public fear, a desire to expose the fragility of societal order, or simply the dark joy of unleashing chaos from anonymity. Spring-Heeled Jack was a master of psychological warfare, leveraging the power of suggestion and the contagious nature of fear. He was a living, leaping testament to the idea that sometimes the most profound disturbances are not those that inflict physical wounds, but those that puncture the very fabric of our perceived reality, reminding us that the line between calculated mischief and genuine menace can be alarmingly thin, and that the shadows often hold precisely what we fear to imagine. The Dreadnought Hoax, orchestrated by the enigmatic Horace de Viercole in 1910, transcends a mere prank. It was a philosophical commentary, a mischievous sally against the very fabric of British imperial pomposity and social hierarchy. At its heart lay a profound exploration of perception, authority, and the inherent human susceptibility to performance. Cole, with his band of bohemian friends, including the nascent Virginia Woolf, donned elaborate disguises as Abyssinian princes, convincing the Royal Navy that they were esteemed foreign dignitaries deserving of a tour of HMS Dreadnought, the pinnacle of naval power. The genius of the hoax was not in its complexity, but in its audacity and its exploitation of class assumptions. The officers, blinded by their ingrained deference to royalty and exoticism, failed to scrutinize the absurdly broken English, the painted faces, or the ludicrous pronouncements of their guests. It revealed how easily the veneer of authority could be pierced by theatricality, how a uniform and a title could confer unquestioning belief, even when confronted with absurdity. The hoax laid bare the performative nature of power, demonstrating that a sufficiently convincing charade could dismantle the most rigid of social structures, if only for an afternoon. It was a testament to the idea that reality is often less about objective truth and more about consensual delusion, particularly within institutions that rely on unwavering respect and unexamined tradition. Cole, the trickster, served as a mirror, reflecting the folly of an empire too enamored with its own grandeur to perceive the jester in its midst. The ensuing public humiliation, though initially met with outrage, eventually settled into a grudging admiration for the sheer effrontery of all, underscoring humanity's odd delight in the spectacular unraveling of pretense. The recurring specter of historical perpetual motion machine scams speaks to a profound, almost mythic human yearning, the desire to transcend fundamental physical limitations, to achieve a state of effortless, endless abundance. These elaborate contraptions, from the subtle deceptions of Johann Ernst Elias Bessler in the 18th century to countless forgotten schemers, were not merely technical failures. They were philosophical constructs, embodying humanity's Promethean impulse to defy entropy, to outwit the universe itself. The allure was irresistible. Imagine a machine that generates its own energy, a limitless wellspring of power that eradicates scarcity, toil, and the very concept of depletion. This vision appealed not only to the avarice of investors, but to the deeper, more primal hopes of a species forever striving for utopia. The scammer, in this context, becomes a kind of high priest of the impossible, promising salvation through mechanics. The willingness of otherwise rational individuals, often including learned scientists and nobility, to invest heavily in such clear violations of known physical laws reveals a fascinating psychological landscape. It points to the intoxicating power of belief, especially when intertwined with economic desperation or the intoxicating prospect of revolutionary change. These machines, perpetually failing yet perpetually reinvented, serve as a mirror reflecting humanity's enduring struggle against the constraints of its own existence. They are monuments to wishful thinking, testaments to the seductive power of a narrative that promises freedom from work and the ultimate mastery over nature. Ultimately, each failed device, each exposed deception, reinforces the immutable laws of the cosmos, yet the dream of perpetual motion, in its various guises, continues to flicker, a testament to our species' indomitable, if sometimes diluted, hope for a world where effort is optional and energy is infinite. The spectral presence of the Jack the Ripper hoax letters offers a fascinating, albeit grim, tableau into the human psyche's response to terror and the intricate dance between truth and fabrication. During the Autumn of Terror in Whitechapel, amidst the chilling murders attributed to the elusive killer, a deluge of correspondence poured into police stations and newspaper offices. These letters, purportedly from the killer himself or from concerned citizens, varied wildly in tone and content, yet a striking majority were soon dismissed as hoaxes. What compels individuals to inject themselves into such a macabre drama, to mimic the voice of a monster, or to exploit collective dread for personal, often inscrutable, gain? It speaks to a deep-seated human impulse for engagement, even if vicariously, with the monumental and the terrifying. Some are undoubtedly crude attempts at infamy, a desperate bid for attention in an anonymity-ridden urban sprawl. Others may have been born of a perverse curiosity, an attempt to understand evil by embodying it, however briefly, through the written word. The infamous Dear Boss letter and the From Hell letter, though likely hoaxes, became woven into the fabric of the Ripper myth, shaping the public's imagination of a theatrical, taunting villain. They muddied the investigative waters, siphoning precious resources and obscuring genuine clues with a cacophony of manufactured voices. This phenomenon underscores the fragility of truth in times of hysteria, how easily narrative can be manipulated, and how the media, by amplifying these sensational deceptions, inadvertently aided in the construction of a legend more terrifying than the reality. These letters, whether scrawled by a bored clerk or a disturbed individual, stand as eerie monuments to the human capacity for morbid creativity and the enduring power of a lie to become, in the collective consciousness, an echo of the truth. The wooden horse of Troy, more than a mere tactical ruse, stands as an enduring philosophical allegory for the insidious nature of deception and the profound vulnerabilities inherent in human perception and trust. After a decade of futile siege, the Greeks, with Odysseus's cunning, devised a strategy that bypassed Troy's formidable, impregnable walls not through force, but through guile. The colossal horse, presented as a votive offering to Athena, with a masterful blend of appearance and reality, a benign exterior concealing a deadly intent. It preyed upon the Trojans' deeply ingrained beliefs, their piety, their desperate desire for an end to the war, and perhaps their own hubris in believing their city truly invulnerable. The decision to bring the horse within their gates was a collective act of misjudgment, born of weary hope and perhaps a willful blindness to the warnings of Cassandra and Laocoon. This legendary act illuminates how easily grand defenses can be breached not by overt assault, but by an understanding of the psychological landscape of the adversary. It speaks to the notion that the greatest threats often come disguised as gifts, that the most potent weapons are not always visible, and that trust, once betrayed, can lead to catastrophic ruin. The Trojans, celebrating their perceived victory and the departure of the Greeks, embraced their doom, pulling it into the very heart of their city. The tale resonates through millennia, serving as a potent metaphor for hidden dangers, for the subtle art of manipulation, and for the tragic consequences of misplaced faith. It is a stark reminder that true security lies not merely in physical fortifications, but in the sharpened faculties of discernment and a keen awareness of the deceptive depths of human nature. In the late Victorian London of 1889, where the veneer of societal morality was meticulously maintained, the Cleveland Street scandal ripped through the gilded cage of the establishment, exposing a male brothel and the illicit desires of its aristocratic clientele. While the core scandal itself was a stark revelation of hidden homosexual life, then a criminal act, the true philosophical tremor lay in the subsequent attempts at obfuscation and deflection, particularly through the deployment of forged letters and manufactured evidence. These were not mere clerical errors or simple fabrications. They were instruments of power, wielded to protect the privileged and incriminate the vulnerable. The aim was to muddy the waters, to shift blame, to implicate innocuous individuals, or to deflect attention from truly damaging associations, such as those with Lord Arthur Somerset or even, whispered through the highest echelons, Prince Albert Victor. This episode lays bare the chilling ease with which truth can be not merely bent, but utterly re-engineered when reputation, power, and the very fabric of social order are perceived to be at stake. It speaks to the insidious nature of enemy within the elite, where the rules of society cease to apply, and where the production of false narratives becomes a primary tool for self-preservation. The forged letters, whether actual physical documents or the deliberate cultivation of damning whispers, highlight the fragility of individual agency and the vulnerability of character in the face of institutionalized manipulation. They are a testament to the psychological warfare waged in the shadows, where fear of exposure, driven by societal prejudice against anything deemed transgressive, fuels a desperate, often ruthless, impulse to control the narrative. The very concept of evidence becomes a mutable construct, a weapon to be forged and deployed, rather than an objective path to understanding. This historical incident forces a contemplation of how deeply ingrained self-preservation, when coupled with absolute power, can corrupt the pursuit of truth, leaving behind a trail of fabricated realities and irreparably damaged lives. In the tumultuous year of 1968, amidst the ferment of social upheaval and political disillusionment, the Youth International Party, or Yippies, unleashed upon the American political landscape an act of profound, almost Dadaist, absurdity: the nomination of a pig named Pegasus for president. This was not a genuine bid for office, nor a simple prank. It was a meticulously crafted political hoax, a performance art piece designed to strip bare the perceived farcical nature of the democratic process and the broader societal structures it upheld. The pig, a creature emblematic of both innocence and base desires, was paraded before the Chicago Democratic National Convention, a living, snorting critique of a system seen as equally mired in the irrational and the corrupt. The philosophical resonance of Pegasus lies in its audacious challenge to the very notion of political seriousness. By presenting an animal as a candidate, the Yippies forced a confrontation with the arbitrary lines drawn around what constitutes legitimate political discourse and who is deemed worthy of participation. It was a potent demonstration of how satire, when pushed to its logical extreme, can become a more incisive critique than any conventional protest. The subsequent arrest of Pegasus and his handlers by Chicago police, a heavy-handed reaction to an inherently absurd situation, only amplified the Yippies' message, proving their point about the establishment's inability to tolerate anything outside its rigidly defined parameters. This moment revealed the psychological vulnerability of authority when confronted with the truly nonsensical, forcing it into a position where its attempts at control only validated the critique. Pegasus was a truth-telling lie, a deliberate deception that, by its very nature, exposed deeper truths about power, the media's complicity in spectacle, and the inherent absurdity of a society grappling with its own contradictions. It stands as a testament to the enduring power of the absurd to cut through the noise, to highlight the emperor's new clothes, and to remind us that sometimes the most profound political statements are made without uttering a single conventional word. The hallowed halls of early 19th century science, particularly in the burgeoning fields of comparative anatomy and paleontology, were presided over by figures of immense intellect and influence. Among these, Georges Cuvier stood as a colossus, shaping the very methodologies of classifying life and reconstructing ancient worlds. It is within this context of scientific titanism that the tale of the orang-utan of the Congo unfurls, not as a genuine discovery, but as a subtle, yet profound, question mark upon the edifice of scientific truth itself. Cuvier, with his unparalleled authority, presented what he claimed was a new great ape species from the largely unexplored depths of Central Africa. Whether a deliberate fabrication, a misidentified specimen presented with a deceptive certainty, or a reassembled chimera, the creature was offered as empirical fact by a man whose word carried immense weight. This episode, upon its eventual unraveling, forces a deep contemplation of the nature of scientific authority and the human element within its pursuit. Was it an ambition unchecked, a desire to fill a perceived gap in the grand tapestry of life, or a more subtle manipulation of evidence to support a pre-existing theoretical framework? The hoax reveals the inherent vulnerability of truth when confronted by the prestige of a single figure. It speaks to the immense trust placed in expert testimony, especially in an era preceding rigorous peer review as we understand it today. The philosophical implications extend beyond mere deception. They touch upon the very construction of knowledge. How much of what we accept as fact is filtered through the lenses of reputation, expectation, or the prevailing scientific zeitgeist? The Orang-utan of the Congo serves as a stark reminder that even the most brilliant minds are not immune to the temptations of intellectual pride or the subtle pressures to confirm a narrative. It underscores the continuous, often arduous, process by which science self-corrects, slowly but inevitably, pulling back the curtain on even the most artfully woven deceptions to reveal the raw, unadorned quest for understanding beneath. In the spring of 1957, as the BBC, a venerable institution synonymous with gravitas and truth, aired its flagship current affairs program, Panorama, British viewers were presented with a segment that would etch itself into the collective memory as a quintessential media hoax. Richard Dimbleby, the very embodiment of journalistic authority, narrated a piece depicting a Swiss family in Ticino harvesting spaghetti from trees. The visuals were compelling. Women carefully plucking strands of pasta from branches, laying them out to dry in the sun, all against a picturesque alpine backdrop. It was a meticulously crafted April Fool's joke, yet its impact transcended mere jest, provoking a widespread credulity that remains fascinating to ponder. The philosophical resonance of the spaghetti tree hoax lies in its profound commentary on the nature of belief, the power of media, and the delicate interplay between presented reality and perceived truth. At a time when television was still a relatively nascent medium, and the BBC held an almost unassailable position as a purveyor of unvarnished fact, the broadcast exploited a deep-seated trust. For many in post-war Britain, spaghetti remained an exotic, somewhat mysterious foodstuff, making its arboreal origins just plausible enough to the uninitiated. The hoax reveals how readily the human mind can suspend its skepticism when confronted by an authoritative source, especially when the information aligns with a vague sense of the foreign or the unusual. It speaks to the inherent human desire for wonder, a willingness to be enchanted, even by the absurd. Beyond simple gullibility, it highlights the immense responsibility of those who shape narratives in the public sphere. The spaghetti tree was not a malicious deception, but a playful experiment that inadvertently exposed the fragile boundaries of media literacy and the often unquestioned authority of the screen. It endures as a gentle, yet potent, reminder of how easily our perceptions of reality can be swayed, and the perennial importance of critical engagement with the narratives that surround us, no matter how persuasively presented. The concept of the fake moon rocks distributed as Nixon's goodwill gifts touches upon a profound philosophical chasm. The disjunction between symbol and substance, and the fragile nature of trust in the edifice of statecraft. These supposed fragments of the lunar surface, presented as tangible emblems of humanity's transcendent reach, were intended to bridge divides, to signify shared achievement and benevolent intent on a global scale. Yet, when some were revealed to be mere terrestrial stone, the gesture transmuted from one of grand generosity into a subtle, almost insidious deception. What does it mean for a symbol of such immense, almost sacred significance, a piece of another world, to be rendered a lie. It speaks to the inherent human yearning for connection to the extraordinary, a longing so potent that it can be cynically exploited by those in positions of power. This act, whether born of deliberate fraud, bureaucratic miscalculation, or simple indifference to truth, unravels a deeper narrative about the construction of reality and the maintenance of authority. The moon rocks were not merely geological specimens. They were artifacts imbued with the awe of the space age, carriers of a story of unprecedented human endeavor and collective triumph. To substitute them with counterfeits is to dilute that narrative, to introduce a corrosive element into the very foundation of belief. It highlights our collective susceptibility to grand gestures, our willingness to accept the presented reality, especially when it aligns with our aspirations for progress, unity, and a sense of belonging to a greater human story. The psychological impact on the recipient, when the truth emerged, must have been a subtle sting, transforming a moment of pride into one of quiet disillusionment. The revelation of their inauthenticity forces a profound reevaluation of the entire exchange. Was the goodwill itself counterfeit, or merely expressed through a flawed, deceptive medium? Does the value of a gift derive solely from its intrinsic nature, or more profoundly from the intention of the giver and the unblemished perception of the recipient? A fake moon rock, believed to be real, still carries the weight of its supposed origin. Its value, though illusory, is potent in its effect. But once exposed, its meaning shifts dramatically, becoming a relic not of lunar triumph, but of earthly artifice and the limitations of political sincerity. It becomes a silent testament to the ease with which truth can be obscured and the enduring human challenge of discerning the genuine from the manufactured, even in the most hallowed of contexts. This episode serves as a quiet, yet piercing, reminder of the precarious balance between the grand narratives we construct to define our collective identity and the often unseen, sometimes mundane, realities that underpin them. It makes one ponder the very essence of authenticity, the nature of symbolic power, and the subtle betrayals that can erode the foundations of collective belief and trust in the highest offices. The Great UFO Hoax of 1966, though ostensibly a tale of misidentified aerial phenomena, unravels into a profound philosophical inquiry into the nature of belief, the limits of scientific explanation, and the often contentious relationship between authority and public perception. What began as a series of compelling lights in the Michigan sky, sparking widespread wonder and fear, culminated in Dr. J. Allen Hynek's now infamous swamp gas hypothesis. This explanation, intended to rationalize the inexplicable, instead ignited a firestorm of ridicule and skepticism, transforming a scientific pronouncement into a symbol of official condescension. At its heart, this event illuminates the enduring human tension between the yearning for the extraordinary and the rational impulse to ground phenomena in the mundane. The public, having gazed upon unexplained lights, perhaps sought a narrative that transcended the everyday, a visitation, a mystery that hinted at realities beyond our current grasp. Hynek, tasked with applying scientific rigor, offered a prosaic, albeit scientifically plausible, explanation. Yet, the very simplicity of swamp gas seemed to mock the profoundness of the public's experience, creating a chasm between lived perception and expert analysis. It revealed how deeply ingrained certain belief systems are, and how resistant they can be to factual dismantling, especially when those facts feel dismissive. The incident also speaks to the precarious role of authority in shaping public truth. When an expert's explanation feels unsatisfactory, or worse, patronizing, it not only discredits the explanation but erodes trust in the authority figure and the institutions they represent. The subsequent congressional hearings were not merely about lights in the sky. They were about the perceived failure of science and government to adequately address public concern and perhaps to respect the validity of lived experience. The swamp gas explanation became a shorthand for official obfuscation, a symbol of the perceived arrogance of the intellectual elite. Ultimately, the 1966 hoax was less about a deliberate deception and more about the collision of differing epistemologies. The empirical method clashing with intuitive wonder, scientific reductionism meeting the human need for the sublime. It underscores the subjective nature of perception and the powerful narratives we construct around the unknown. Even when a scientific explanation is offered, the desire for mystery often persists, transforming the hoax into a poignant reminder of our enduring fascination with the unexplained and our perpetual struggle to reconcile the vastness of the cosmos with the confines of our understanding. It forces us to ponder what we want to believe versus what we can rationally explain, and the uncomfortable spaces where those two impulses diverge. The story of the Martian canals, those phantom lines etched across the red planet's surface, is less a tale of astronomical discovery and more a profound meditation on human perception, the yearning for cosmic companionship, and the intricate dance between observation and desire. It began innocently enough with Giovanni Schiaparelli's telescopic observations in the late 19th century, noting linear features he called canali, Italian for channels, but quickly translated to canals, implying artificiality. This linguistic shift, subtle yet monumental, opened a floodgate for the human imagination. Percival Lowell, an American astronomer, became the most fervent evangelist for these Martian waterways. He dedicated years to mapping intricate networks of canals, convinced they were the work of an advanced, dying civilization desperately irrigating their arid world. Lowell's elaborate drawings, meticulously detailed and aesthetically compelling, became iconic. Yet, the philosophical crux lies not in their accuracy, but in their genesis. Were these lines truly seen, or were they drawn by the human hand of expectation, of hope, of an almost primal need to not be alone in the vast, cold cosmos? This episode illuminates the inherent subjectivity of even scientific observation. At the limits of telescopic resolution, the human eye, ever eager to find patterns, to connect the dots, can impose order upon chaos. Faint, indistinct features, perhaps optical illusions or natural geological formations, were interpreted through the lens of terrestrial engineering and anthropocentric bias. The canals became a mirror reflecting humanity's own aspirations, its technological prowess, and its deep-seated narrative of progress and struggle. It was a grand projection, a collective dream superimposed onto a distant world. The eventual debunking of the canals, as better telescopes revealed a cratered, lifeless landscape, did not diminish the profound lesson. It underscored the fallibility of perception, the power of narrative to shape truth, and the poignant vulnerability of a species that yearns to find itself reflected, however faintly, in the cosmic expanse. The drawn by a human hand refers not just to Lowell's pencil, but to the collective human consciousness that conjured a civilization into being, if only for a fleeting, beautiful moment on the face of Mars. The audacious swindle perpetrated by Victor Lustig, wherein he sold the Eiffel Tower, stands as a timeless parable on the intricate mechanics of human trust, ambition, and the seductive allure of the exclusive deal. It wasn't merely a trick of ledger books or counterfeit currency. It was a profound psychological experiment, executed with a theatrical flair that revealed much about the inherent vulnerabilities within the human psyche. Lustig, a con artist of exquisite refinement, understood that the most potent currency is not money, but belief. His scheme was predicated on an exquisitely crafted narrative, that the Eiffel Tower, after years of use, had become an eyesore and a financial burden to the city of Paris, and the government, in a top-secret operation, was seeking to discreetly dismantle and sell it for scrap. The genius lay not in the lie itself, but in the elaborate, believable context Lustig constructed. He impersonated a high-ranking government official, held clandestine meetings in luxurious hotels, and cultivated an air of urgent, confidential authority. The targets were not naive bumpkins, but shrewd scrap metal dealers, men accustomed to assessing value and striking deals. Lustig understood their core drivers. Greed, certainly, but also the desire for an unparalleled opportunity, a chance to outmaneuver rivals and secure a truly historic profit. The philosophical depth of the con lies in its manipulation of perceived reality. Lustig didn't own the Eiffel Tower, nor could he legally transfer its ownership. Yet, through his performance, his carefully chosen words, and the created environment of secrecy and urgency, he made the illusion feel more real than reality itself. He preyed upon cognitive biases, the confirmation bias, where the dealers saw what they wanted to see, the authority bias, where Lustig's fabricated position lent him undue credibility, and the scarcity principle, making the deal seem uniquely valuable because it was secret and limited. The Eiffel Tower, a symbol of French permanence and pride, became, in the minds of the marks, a temporary commodity, disposable for the right price. Lustig's triumph was not just financial, but psychological, a demonstration of how easily one can sell that which is not theirs, when the buyer is already selling themselves on the dream of an impossible gain. It remains a chillingly elegant testament to the enduring human capacity for self-deception in the face of perceived advantage. The narrative of Charles Ponzi, though deeply rooted in a particular moment of American history, echoes a timeless human vulnerability and a profound philosophical question concerning the nature of value itself. His scheme, born in the early 20th century, was not merely a financial fraud. It was an elaborate ballet of human desire, collective illusion, and the insidious erosion of trust. Ponzi promised extraordinary returns on international postal coupons, an obscure arbitrage opportunity few understood, yet many were eager to believe. The genius, or perhaps the malevolence, lay in his exploitation of a fundamental human tendency, the desire for effortless prosperity. People were not investing in a tangible product or a productive enterprise. They were investing in a story, a promise, and, ultimately, in the growing belief of others. This created a self-referential loop, a recursive amplification of faith where the new money from later investors paid off the early ones, creating an illusion of success that drew in even more capital. It was a grand performance of wealth, where the stage was set by the initial returns, the actors were the unwitting investors, and the script was written by pure deceit. Philosophically, it highlights how easily our perception of value can be decoupled from intrinsic worth and instead become a function of collective belief and the promise of future gain. The scheme flourished on the emotional contagion of greed and hope, demonstrating how a charismatic deception can eclipse rational judgment. When the music stopped and the new money ceased to flow, the elaborate edifice collapsed, revealing its true nature, a void built not on creation, but on consumption, consuming the very trust it had so meticulously cultivated. It stands as a stark reminder of the fragile boundary between legitimate enterprise and predatory artifice, a boundary often blurred by the intoxicating whispers of easy riches. The Great Stock Exchange fraud of 1814, often associated with Lord Cochrane, delves into the volatile alchemy of information, perception, and collective hysteria within financial markets. It was not a scheme of perpetual returns like Ponzi's, but rather a sharp, precise manipulation of public sentiment to achieve immediate, illicit gain. The deception involved spreading false news of Napoleon's defeat and death, a deeply desired outcome for Britain amidst the Napoleonic Wars. The perpetrators understood that in times of profound uncertainty and high-stakes conflict, the populace, and thus the markets, are exquisitely sensitive to signals, especially those pertaining to peace or war. By faking a military courier's arrival, complete with uniform and embellishments of triumph, they engineered a powerful illusion of truth. This act was a profound commentary on the power of symbolic representation and the human tendency to interpret ambiguous signs through the lens of their deepest hopes or fears. The immediate surge in stock prices, particularly government consols, reflected a collective sigh of relief, a sudden belief in a brighter economic future. This rapid appreciation allowed the conspirators to offload their previously accumulated stocks at inflated prices. Philosophically, it underscores the market as a psychological construct, a vast network of interconnected beliefs and anticipations, rather than merely a dry calculation of intrinsic values. It reveals how easily this collective consciousness can be swayed by deliberate artifice, how a carefully crafted lie can momentarily redefine reality for thousands. The fraud exposed the inherent vulnerability of trust in a system built upon the presumed integrity of information. It was a stark demonstration that in the intricate dance between truth and profit, truth can be a malleable, even expendable, commodity when the stakes are high enough, leaving in its wake a bitter residue, a betrayal, and a profound questioning of what truly constitutes value in an economy so susceptible to the currents of human emotion. The so-called Great Kreskin Hoax wasn't a hoax in the traditional sense of a deliberate deception, but rather a fascinating exposé of the subtle interplay between perception, suggestion, and the human desire for the extraordinary. Kreskin, a renowned mentalist, cultivated an image of possessing genuine psychic abilities, performing feats seemingly defying rational explanation. His performances involved predicting events, reading minds, and engaging in other acts that captivated audiences and fueled speculation about the paranormal. However, the media, particularly investigative journalists, began scrutinizing his methods. The hoax, as it came to be known, wasn't about revealing a deliberate fraud, but rather about unveiling the techniques Kreskin employed to create the illusion of psychic powers. These techniques, far from being supernatural, were rooted in clever misdirection, subtle suggestion, and psychological manipulation. He frequently used ambiguous predictions, allowing for multiple interpretations that could be spun as successful prophecies after the fact. His performances involved carefully crafted routines designed to subtly guide participants towards desired outcomes, creating a sense of participation and involvement that obscured the mechanics of his methods. He often employed confederates, individuals subtly placed within the audience who would assist in creating the illusion of spontaneous events. The hoax wasn't a revelation of a malicious deception, but rather a demystification of a carefully constructed performance. It underscored how readily humans are inclined to attribute seemingly inexplicable events to paranormal causes, even in the absence of irrefutable evidence. The significance of the Kreskin hoax extends beyond the specific case of one mentalist. It serves as a compelling case study in the psychology of belief and the power of suggestion. It highlights the human capacity for self-deception and our inherent tendency to seek patterns and meaning even in random events. The media's role in shaping public perception also played a significant part. Kreskin's notoriety was partly fueled by the very media coverage that ultimately exposed his techniques. The event forces us to confront the nature of evidence, the limitations of perception, and the slippery slope between genuine skill and cleverly constructed illusion. It raises profound questions about the boundaries of belief, the allure of the extraordinary, and our ongoing fascination with the seemingly impossible. It serves as a reminder that skepticism, critical thinking, and a thorough examination of evidence are essential tools in navigating a world saturated with claims of the paranormal. The hoax wasn't about proving Kreskin a fraud, but about illuminating the psychological mechanisms that make such performances so compelling and believable. To speak of the Mokele-mbembe as a hoax is to delve not into a singular, deliberate act of deception, but rather into the complex psychological and philosophical terrain of collective belief, aspiration, and the enduring human fascination with the unknown. It is less a calculated trick and more a cultural phenomenon, a self-perpetuating narrative that embodies our profound yearning for wonder, for the existence of ancient mysteries still lurking in the untouched corners of the earth. The legend of a living sauropod in the Congo's remote depths serves as a potent archetype, a symbol of the untamed wilderness and the possibility that our scientific understanding is incomplete, that leviathans might yet roam beyond the maps. Philosophically, the persistence of the Mokele-mbembe narrative invites contemplation on the very nature of evidence and belief. It highlights the human tendency to privilege anecdotal accounts, blurry photographs, and tantalizing local folklore over the rigorous demands of empirical proof. The hoax here is subtle. It resides in the romanticization of the unverified, the projection of our own desires for a more mysterious world onto the natural landscape. Expeditions are mounted, often driven by a spirit of adventure and discovery, yet consistently yield no concrete, verifiable evidence. Still, the myth endures, passed down through generations, amplified by cryptozoological enthusiasts, and occasionally sensationalized by media outlets eager for a compelling tale. This enduring narrative reveals much about the human psyche. It speaks to our deep-seated need for narratives that challenge the mundane, that offer a glimmer of the impossible. The Mokele-mbembe becomes a vessel for these desires, a modern myth that intertwines indigenous knowledge, Western scientific curiosity, and a powerful sense of nostalgia for a prehistoric past. It is a testament to how cultural narratives can take on a life of their own, becoming real in their psychological impact, even in the absence of physical manifestation. The hoax, then, is perhaps the collective agreement to suspend disbelief, to inhabit a liminal space where hope and speculation hold more sway than the cold dictates of zoological classification. It is a mirror reflecting our own capacity for self-deception, our willingness to chase phantoms if they promise to imbue the world with a greater sense of magic and possibility, reminding us that sometimes the most persistent hoaxes are those we construct and maintain within the very architecture of our shared imagination. The shadow of deception often falls longest upon the most intensely desired truths. The Hitler's forgery, specifically the infamous Stern magazine Hitler Diaries of the early 1980s, was not merely a historical hoax, but a profound meditation on the human yearning for ultimate revelation, particularly concerning figures who embody radical evil. It was a testament to the seductive power of a supposed final word from the abyss, a glimpse into the unfiltered psyche of a monster. The forger Konrad Kujau and the journalist Gerd Heidemann exploited not just greed, but a deeper, almost primal, intellectual hunger to penetrate the impenetrable enigma of Hitler's final days, and by extension, his very being. What this monumental fraud revealed was the fragility of historical truth when confronted with compelling narratives and the allure of sensation. The documents, purportedly Hitler's personal diaries and other papers, were presented as an unparalleled breakthrough, promising to rewrite the understanding of the Nazi regime and its architect. Yet, they were nothing more than crude fabrications, their superficial authenticity masking a profound hollowness. The eagerness with which they were embraced by even respected historians, initially, speaks volumes about the persuasive power of a tangible artifact. A piece of paper, seemingly touched by history, can imbue itself with a false authority that overrides even the most fundamental critical faculties. This episode underscores the psychological landscape of historical inquiry, the desire for definitive answers, the inherent trust in documentary evidence, and the potential for confirmation bias to blind even the most rigorous minds. It exposed the vulnerability of the collective consciousness to narratives that align with pre-existing fascinations or offer sensational revelations. The hoax was a mirror, reflecting humanity's perpetual struggle with evil, its desperate need to comprehend the incomprehensible, and its susceptibility to the very human flaws of ambition, credulity, and the intoxicating promise of possessing a singular, earth-shattering truth. It reminded us that the past, though fixed in its events, remains perpetually open to interpretation and, tragically, manipulation, revealing the enduring tension between objective fact and subjective desire. The phenomenon of spirit photography was a poignant, sometimes predatory, manifestation of humanity's enduring struggle with mortality and the profound ache of grief. Emerging in the mid-19th century, notably with figures like William Mumler, these hoaxes exploited a newly emergent technology, photography, and a deeply rooted human vulnerability, the desperate desire for connection with the departed. In an age marked by widespread death, particularly following devastating conflicts like the American Civil War and a burgeoning spiritualist movement, the camera, then widely regarded as an objective recorder of reality, offered a tantalizing, almost miraculous promise, visible proof of the afterlife. The success of these deceptions lay in the potent alchemy of technological novelty and profound emotional need. A photograph, a tangible image, seemed to transcend the ephemeral nature of memory or the subjective experience of a séance. It was presented as irrefutable evidence, a captured fragment of the unseen world. Mumler, through techniques like double exposure or manipulation of negatives, would produce images where faint, ghostly apparitions appeared alongside living sitters, often identified by the grieving as deceased loved ones. This wasn't merely a trick. It was a performance crafted to tap directly into the human heart's deepest yearnings for continuity beyond the veil of death. Philosophically, spirit photography probes the very nature of belief, evidence, and perception. It asks what we are willing to accept as truth when our emotional landscape is shattered by loss. It reveals the power of an image to conjure reality, especially when that reality aligns with a cherished hope. The credulity surrounding these hoaxes was not simply naive. It was a testament to the strength of human longing for reunion, for solace, for an answer to the terrifying finality of death. It underscores how our internal worlds, our grief, our faith, our desperate need for meaning, can profoundly shape our interpretation of external phenomena, making us susceptible to illusions that promise to bridge the chasm between worlds. These hoaxes were not just about the deceivers. They were profound reflections on the hopes, fears, and vulnerabilities inherent in the human condition itself.